John, thank you so much for that kind introduction, and thanks to all of you for that warm welcome. It is a real privilege to be here with you. Thanks also to David Harris for your leadership of the American Jewish Committee and for making me part of this global forum among such distinguished company. I've always been impressed by this organization and what you've been doing for Jewish communities and for human justice around the world for more than 110 years. So before I begin my formal remarks, though, what I'd like to do is reiterate America's heartfelt condolences to the British and the Afghan people, and also to reiterate our unshakable resolve to stand with them in the face of recent terrorist attacks. These latest atrocities underscore the urgency of our shared challenges. To our British and Afghan brothers and sisters, you're in our thoughts and in our prayers. I'd like to talk to you today about those challenges, and specifically those that American leadership can address and help overcome. Working on today's complex issues, though, requires some humility, and humility leads us to study the past as the first step toward understanding the present. I've always tried to study history in the manner advised by Sir Michael Howard, in width, depth, and in context. But we as human beings, and especially I think Americans, tend to view our own situations as unprecedented and typically as unprecedentedly bad or dire. No one's ever had it this tough before. That's a common sentiment today. It may also serve as a coping mechanism. But a famous saying might serve as a corrective. That is, history may not repeat itself, but it rhymes. By understanding the past, we can help ensure that we ask the right questions and take fundamentally sound approaches to today's problems and opportunities. So let us consider Israel's situation a half a century ago today. Egypt had positioned all 7 divisions of its army, nearly 100,000 troops, in the Sinai. On Israel's eastern flank, Jordanian and Iraqi units massed. It was a desperate situation for Israel. The battles that ensued not only reshaped the map of the Middle East, they also changed our understanding of modern warfare. As a young cavalry officer in the 1980s, I studied the actions of Israeli commanders and recognized that the Six-Day War had a profound effect on America's fighting concepts, leading to what became known as air-land battle doctrine. There are, of course, limits, though, to what we can learn and apply from history. The war whose anniversary we mark tomorrow was born of a particular set of circumstances and constrained by a particular set of challenges and conditions. Yet we can still make observations about that experience that are relevant to today's problems, especially, I think, observations at a high level of generality. I ask that we consider 2 observations from the Six-Day War that are relevant to today's problems. The first is that threats to our security do not remain static. They evolve. Israel's history offers a vivid example. At the start of the Six-Day War, the very survival of the Jewish state was in jeopardy. Later, across the ensuing decades, that threat evolved and Israel was forced to defend against sophisticated terrorist organizations, Hamas and Hezbollah, funded and aided by antagonistic nation states. Today, we are witnessing changes in the character of transnational terrorist organizations who wage criminal warfare against all civilized peoples. With the rise of ISIS, the enemy's focus has shifted to seizing and holding territory. Their motto is endure and expand. It's also their objective. And ISIS exploits that control of territory and populations and resources to perpetuate and extend its ability to terrorize innocents. And over the last 40 years, Iran has shifted its tactics and operational approach, acting through its terrorist proxy network, building up its ballistic missile capability, taking provocative actions in the Gulf and beyond, and working to keep its Arab neighbors perpetually weak and engaged in sectarian conflict. In this challenging environment, Israel has adapted and performed amazingly well, in part because the country has consistently recognized and acted on opportunities when others might have only seen difficulties. The first step towards seizing the initiative, despite setbacks at the onset of conflicts, not only the conflict in 1967, but also conflicts in 1973 and 2006, is to see beyond difficulties and identify opportunities. We learned from the SixDay War that no matter how dire a situation looks, opportunities are present. And it's sometimes good to laugh about dire situations in retrospect. I'm reminded that when Winston Churchill lost the 1945 election in a massive landslide, his wife remarked that the result might have been a blessing in disguise. If so, the former Prime Minister shot back, then former Prime Minister shot back. The blessing had been very effectively disguised. With armies massing against Israel on all sides, the blessing was indeed very effectively disguised. But Israel's leaders and warriors saw past the immediate danger. Soon after the SixDay War, an American general, Don Starry, a legendary soldier, scholar, real hero of mine, who was one of the officers responsible for the Renaissance in the United States Army in the post-Vietnam era. He traveled to Israel to learn from the war, and he observed that by far the majority of winners in battles were those who somehow seized the initiative from the enemy. In June 1967, Israeli Defense Forces saw that Egyptian divisions, so formidable on paper, were built up in defensive belts along the major roads through the Sinai. The Israeli commanders saw the desert spaces between them as gaps to be exploited. By bold maneuver, they seized and retained the initiative. That creativity and ingenuity should be a model for us today, on and off battlefields. We must look for opportunities, even in the challenging landscape of the modern Middle East. The ongoing humanitarian and political catastrophe that has engulfed the region, created by barbaric, Takfirist and Salafi jihadist terrorist groups and exacerbated by Iran, is both a tragedy and an opportunity. Today we are witnessing a reassessment of regional relationships, most notably between Israel and a number of our Arab partners, all friends of America, but too often adversaries of each other. Today their interests are converging. This is an opportunity. Against this backdrop and predisposed toward seizing opportunities, President Trump embarked on his historic first foreign trip, the trip that John mentioned. His objectives were simple and direct. First, to affirm America's role in global leadership as we revitalize critical alliances and assure our partners. Second, to continue building key relationships with world leaders. And third, to promote a message of unity among the followers of three of the world's great faiths. We began the trip in Saudi Arabia. The president strengthened this key partnership and forged a personal bond with King Salman. He brought together our Gulf Arab partners to fight terrorist finance and to pledge greater security cooperation. In an extraordinary speech, the President outlined a path of unity and peace to people of all faiths and called on over 50 leaders of Muslim-majority countries to cut off financing for extremists and prevent them from hijacking and perverting their religion. In the speeches that followed, many of those leaders, including King Salman of Saudi Arabia, King Abdullah of Jordan, President al-Sisi of Egypt, President Widodo of Indonesia, and Prime Minister Razak of Malaysia, all echoed President Trump's call for greater tolerance and a stronger stance against extremism. I recommended looking at these speeches. Some applause almost broke out here because it is significant. It is significant, the confluence of ideas, the common condemnation of those who are hijacking Islam to justify violence against innocents. So this is an opportunity. I know there's healthy skepticism due to failure of past promises and the fact that many of these countries have been the sources of terrorist funding and the propagation of extremist Islamist ideology. None of us, the President least of all, will be impressed by mere words. We expect to see action, and we will hold one another accountable as we strengthen our existing partnerships and forge new ones. We have clear metrics for countering terrorist finance and clear metrics to evaluate the effectiveness of the Center to Counter Extremism. We will encourage and reward success, and we will deal with inaction and lack of progress accordingly as well. But the opportunities associated with new partnerships includes the renewed pursuit of enduring peace between Israel and the Palestinians. The President took this message to Israel, where he reaffirmed America's rock-solid alliance with our closest Middle East ally, and also met with the leadership of the Palestinian Authority. He emphasized, as he had in Riyadh, that now is the time to come together to defeat terrorist organizations and extremist ideology, and to confront Iran's destructive actions in the region. In Israel, he laid a wreath at Yad Vashem to reiterate America's solemn pledge to the Jewish people: never again. And he visited two of the holiest sites in Judaism and Christianity to underscore this key theme of the trip, that people of all faiths must prioritize our common humanity and denounce those who foment hatred to rationalize violence against innocents. And that we all must instead promote tolerance and respect as shared values. The President carried this theme to Rome, where he was honored to be received by His Holiness Pope Francis in the historic center of Christianity's single largest denomination. With Pope Francis, the President affirmed America's commitment to defend religious freedom, combat religious persecution, and cooperate with the Vatican on humanitarian missions. In Brussels, the President reaffirmed America's unbreakable commitment to our NATO allies in Article 5, stating clearly that NATO is rooted in, quote, the courage of our people, the strength of our resolve, and the commitments that bind us together as one. There may be some skepticism here too, given some of the headlines, but you heard the President convey a direct, necessary message on our commitment, as well as the need for all allies to meet pledges, increase responsibility and burden sharing, and focus on counterterrorism. And I'm sure you heard the criticism that the president somehow, by being so direct, alienated America's oldest friends. But many of our closest allies and Secretary General Stoltenberg personally thanked the president for leading on the issue of spending at least 2% of gross domestic product on defense. They know that sometimes it takes plain speaking to spur action. Due in part to President Trump's request, NATO as an alliance has joined the counter-ISIS coalition as an alliance. And the vast majority of NATO members are answering the president's challenge by resolving to increase their defense budgets. Finally, in Sicily, the president engaged directly with 6 of America's closest allies, the G7, on a wide range of issues. He urged the leaders to stand with the United States, Japan, and South Korea against North Korean aggression and provocative behavior. He pressed for greater counterterrorism cooperation, including in the fight against ISIS. The president has charged all of us, his team broadly, with maintaining the positive momentum generated during the trip to deliver results. That is, to ensure that we, the United States, and our allies and partners, seize and retain the initiative. None of the complex national and international security challenges we face can be solved in a short period of time, 4 months, for example. But we are seizing the initiative due to American leadership, new partnerships, and stronger alliances. History does bring perspective. Indeed, as challenging as today's situation is, it does not seem quite as dire as the situation did in Israel in the early hours of June 5th. But the opportunities to be seized are no less real, and we can, with your help, the help of AJC and those you can bring together behind these efforts, we can seize upon these opportunities to wrest the initiative from our enemies and protect all of humanity. Thank you very much.